The other day, I posted a question to my Instagram stories asking you what was your biggest worry about moving to Italy, and I was actually flooded with responses. And so in today's video, I'm going to be addressing some of your key concerns about moving to Italy to hopefully put your mind at rest, or at the very least be able to point you to some form of advice and guidance that can help support you, because I truly believe that you can make a success of your life here in Italy if you're fully prepared and ready for it. So let's begin with the first category, and it falls under work. So many of you had concerns about finding a job or working in a professional capacity here in Italy that we're going to talk about it. So first and foremost, if you are planning to work here in Italy under a professional capacity, maybe you're a qualified nurse, which I know one of you mentioned in your comments, or in the medical sector or the financial sector, whatever it may be, you're going to need to get any external certifications that have been taken outside of Italy recognised in this country. I'm going to put a link below into the show notes, and the links for what I'm talking about will be categorised by the different areas that we're going to discuss today, so it's going to be nice and simple for you to work out where you need to go. But this link will take you through to the government website, which explains exactly what you need to do in order to get any external certifications recognised here in Italy. But you're going to need to follow that process before you can apply for a job using your existing qualifications, if that's what you plan to do. If you don't have any idea what you want to work as here in Italy, then you can turn to the search engines that a lot of Italian people use. Indeed, we've got CareerJet, and there is EnglishJobs.it, which prides itself on listing jobs available in Italy that require English speakers. Now, it's not to say that this website is entirely foolproof. There is a button that you can press if you notice that they've inaccurately listed a job as English speaking when it isn't. But you know, it could be a good place to start if you don't want to go down the conventional path of becoming an English teacher, but you'd like to explore other career options here in Italy. Now, of course, if you speak Italian, your doors are naturally going to be more open and available to you for career options than if you don't. So, you know, you might have more flexibility if you're able to do a job that also requires an Italian speaker. Now, if you really don't know what to do here and what to get a job as, don't disregard the job of an English teacher, because I promise you it can be a great way to get your foot onto the career ladder here and to actually set your life up. Now, you've got different options here. You can apply to be an English teacher at a state school, but there's a process that you need to follow for that. Or you can apply at the hundreds of private schools that you'll find all across Italy. Now, there is a demand for English speakers here in Italy, and the demand tends to increase the further south that you go. So it can be a good career option to begin with. Now, a lot of people will say to me, like, don't you need to have previous teaching experience? Don't you need to have like a teaching qualification? I don't know if I had luck on my side or if I just had enough life experience to show that I could handle being a teacher, but I do not have a teaching qualification, and I did not have any teaching experience prior to coming to Italy. As I've said before, I think I had a whole heap of luck on my side, and also the fact that I came from the UK at a time when it was still part of the EU, meaning that it was a lot easier for companies to employ me than it would be today. The first job that I applied for was at a school in Naples. It was a Montessori bilingual school, and I'm so grateful to that school in a way for employing me, because it gave me my first real taste of work experience here in Italy. Now, the pay wasn't fantastic at all, but this is another piece of advice I want to give you. Don't be afraid of downgrading at the very beginning just to get your foot onto the career ladder. Maybe it means you start off as a teaching assistant rather than a full-blown teacher, but if it gives you that experience, at some point here in Italy, experience speaks more than qualifications. Consider I've been teaching here now for 6 and a bit years, and whenever I've needed to change schools, I've never had a problem in finding another job because of the existing experience I've already gained here in Italy. Experience really does mean a lot here, especially if you are an expat or an immigrant. So the more experience you can gain here, the better. Which is why I really do recommend just getting your foot onto the career ladder in any way, shape or form that you can, working in that job for as long as you feel able to do so, and then giving yourself that necessary experience, which means that at some point, those qualifications or whatever people say are so vital for your work are not necessary anymore, because your experience speaks for itself. And trust me when I say that is a really, really important thing. Another thing to consider is to really think outside of the box when it comes to applying for jobs here. What existing skills do you have that could translate into job roles here in Italy? As an example, when I applied for work here in Italy, I didn't just apply for English teacher jobs. I also applied to be a website designer at a major cruise ship company here in Italy. And I actually was successful. I had an interview and everything. But in the end, I decided to go with English teacher role because I felt more comfortable. It was in English. My Italian was super, super basic at that point, and I didn't feel like I would really feel comfortable working in an organisation where the majority of people spoke in Italian. And so I opted to go for the English teacher route because I felt it would give me more confidence and stability in the long run. But there you have it. The reason I felt confident in applying for that position is because I'd had my own business in the UK and I'd maintained my website and looked after it in that sense. So look for your existing skills. What could translate into other job roles here in Italy? I think you'll be quite surprised. Now, of course, it goes without saying, your ability to work in Italy at all, whether remotely or here in Italy itself, really does depend on whether or not you're going to need a work permit or visa. Now, there are so many different things that you have to consider for this. I'm going to put a link below in the notes to a legal company here in Italy that have done a really good article breaking down the different visa types, just to help to give you a bit of a foundation as to what you can expect to consider. But if you have a work visa or permit, it is linked to your work contract and will be valid for the duration of that contract. So there is a lot that rests on it. It also depends on whether or not the job you're applying for is subject to the limits that are placed every single year by the Italian government as to how many visas can be issued for particular professions. So there is a lot. Your company as well also needs to be able to be prepared to sponsor you for this work permit and visa too. So go ahead and look at that link and just start to educate yourself on the different visa options that are available for you. There is also the digital nomad visa, but I know that that can be a bit tricky. Although some people have been successful at obtaining it, you do have to make sure that you really understand what is required of you to be applicable for those. But don't let it put you off. It just means that you've got to do a bit more groundwork before you actually start applying for jobs to make sure that you're physically able to do so in the first place. And if you're really serious about working in Italy, then I'm going to direct you to this video here to watch later, because this video here will talk to you about some of the surprising things that you might encounter working here in Italy, because you know it's always good to be prepared. Now, the second category was finding a home. Now, this is something that I would say concerns a lot of people, because there are lots of stories that I've read recently as well about expats, immigrants, people finding it difficult coming from outside of Italy to actually find somewhere to stay on a long-term basis. Now, a lot of this is because there is a bit of a mindset here amongst Italian people of making sure they can fully trust whoever it is that they're letting their property to, because it can be very difficult, expensive and costly to evict tenants once they are in place if they suddenly stop paying their rent or start damaging the property, for example. So for this, there are lots of different measures that are put in place. Sometimes you have to pay higher deposits. Sometimes you have to really evidence every single aspect of your earnings. What I would say to you is try to be as open and transparent as you can. If you need to evidence your earnings, if you need to evidence your contract of work, if you need to pay an extra month's deposit or you're willing to do so just for goodwill, then do it. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily right. I do believe that everybody, whether you are external from Italy or you are a citizen of Italy, should be treated the same. However, if it means that you have a roof over your head and you get, again, your foot onto the rental ladder, this is exactly what you need to do. Like, I really do believe that once you get your foot on the ladder in all of these different areas that we're talking about today, it becomes a lot easier later on to change options and to change ideas, because you've got some kind of history behind you. When you've got nothing behind you and people don't know you from Adam, it's really, really difficult sometimes for people to trust in you. So another piece of advice I would give you in this sector would be to try to form connections in expat groups. Somebody always knows somebody who knows somebody, and you know, there could be somebody in those groups that is looking for a person to rent a room or a home, whatever it is that you're looking for. So that could be another great way for you to find somewhere. Now, there are also property websites that you can try. Idealista, Immobiliare, these are two that I recommend. You've just got to be prepared that you're going to be met with a bit of resistance when you're looking for somewhere to live. You might be told that the property is not available anymore. You might be told a higher amount of rent per month. These things can happen, and I've read stories of people who have experienced this. just understand the rationale behind it. It's because landlords are genuinely nervous about letting out their properties to people they don't know, or people who don't have a history of anything here in Italy, you know, like no work, no family, no friends, etc. So you've just got to bear with it and grit your teeth a little bit and get through that process. Now, you could also consider going through an agency as well, like an estate agency. You need to make sure you've got your codice fiscale, which is the kind of key to unlocking life here in Italy, at least set up in place before you start looking for somewhere to live, because this is really what opens up a lot of your doors here in Italy, and it's more difficult to follow this process if you don't have it, especially if you intend to live here on a long-term basis. So there are options for you. You might even consider renting a room to begin with. This really depends on you and your personal circumstances. If you're moving here alone or you're with a family or partner, this, you know, really depends on what your situation is. But if you're moving here on your own, you might even consider renting a room to begin with. But you've just got to make sure that you can get your residency attached to that. Some places will let you do it on that basis, others won't. But the key thing you've got to make sure when you're renting a property here in Italy is that you are allowed to apply for residence at that property. Now, of course, if you're buying a property, that is a whole other ball game, and you need to make sure that you understand the legal obligations of that. So you need to really do your research on that. But if you're renting, I do suggest at the very beginning this can be better, because you have a little bit more flexibility if you decide that you don't like the place that you've moved to, for example, or if you decide that living here in Italy is not for you, because, you know, you may not even realise that until you've actually moved here. So I do think renting sometimes can be better if this is really what you intend to do on a long-term basis. But if you've got any more kind of queries about renting in Italy, then you need to watch this video later, because this video talks a bit more about what you can expect about renting in Italy, and I go into a lot more detail about the things you need to look out for and how to be a bit more prepared. Okay, the next area was language. Now, there's no running away from it. You need to learn Italian, and the sooner you can start learning, the better. Even begin today if you can. There are so many resources that you can use to do this, from free resources such as watching YouTube videos or people on Instagram or TikTok, through to more paid programs. But I really recommend that you just start to form a consistent study habit. It doesn't have to be trying to find huge chunks of time every single week. It can just be as much as like 15 to 30 minutes a day. If that's all you can handle, over the course of a week, you've achieved more than you would have if you were trying to find solid 1 or 2 hour chunks. So the power of consistency is very, very important when it comes to learning a language. But as I've said in so many of my other videos, I don't want you to think that you have to be fluent before you move here. Some people really give this advice to people that want to move here and say you need to speak Italian fluently before you come here. I don't agree with this, because I think to reach a degree of fluency can take some people years. And, you know, why hold off your dream for years just to arrive at this perceived perfect place before moving here? I say move here with an adequate amount of Italian to be able to communicate in everyday situations, but then continue your study when you're here, because at least then you're starting to live your dream, right? It's not easy to survive life here if you don't speak in Italian. You will be lucky, you will find people who can interpret for you. Expat groups can help a lot as well if you kind of need that solidarity from people who speak your language, but you really do need to start learning, and I really do think begin as soon as you can and don't stop learning as soon as you arrive here. I think this is something that a lot of people, they know that they have to do this, but they don't really understand how it's going to impact their life until they start living this experience. So make sure that you concentrate on this if you are planning to move to Italy, and don't let the language scare you from making this decision. It's not easy to learn another language, particularly when you're an adult and you have adult responsibilities and you're kind of out of touch with studying, because let's face it, once we leave school, college, university, wherever we've gone, we kind of lose the habit of studying unless it's a discipline that we maintain. So don't let it overwhelm you. Find a study routine and path that fits you, and make sure that you do what lights you up and do what makes you feel good when it comes to study. If you're not the person to sit at a table with a textbook, don't do it. Watch a video instead. Play an interactive game instead. There are lots of other things that you can do to kind of encourage you to learn the language rather than trying to follow traditional methods. And if you need some more ideas, then this is the video I want you to watch later, which is going to give you some more ways that you can consider learning Italian and integrating it into your daily routine. Okay, the next category is food, and some of you were concerned about the lack of variety when it comes to food here in Italy. There's no denying it, yes, the food here is of a very high quality and standard, but I do agree with this at points because there are certain places and parts of Italy where there isn't as much diversity when it comes to cuisine choices, but this really does depend where you are. So back in Salerno, where I lived for 4 years, I would say the choice of cuisine was a little bit more limited, but then that is a smaller city. Here in Palermo, you can definitely find different types of cuisine compared to Salerno. So it really does depend where you are. But I would say that, you know, if there is a particular dish that you end up missing, there are plenty of places here where you can buy international ingredients so that you can recreate the food that you miss back at home. Even if you have to adapt it slightly with some Italian ingredients, you'll find your way. I have to be honest, when I first moved here, I was absolutely in love with the idea of pizza and pasta, that I didn't really think I'd miss any English food. And then as time went on, I started to think back to what I used to eat, and I did miss a couple of dishes, but the longer I've spent here, the less I thought about British food, to the point now where I don't even miss anything from the UK. Like, there's no cravings that I have, or, you know, times where I'm like, oh my goodness, I could really eat this. Like maybe at Christmas with mince pies is the only time of the year where I'm like, oh gosh, I miss that. But other than that, no, because let me tell you, it's a culinary adventure living here in Italy. Every single region has kind of typical dishes. There are hundreds upon hundreds of pasta recipes. It's not just going to be pasta and tomato every single day. It's amazing, and I don't think you'll ever get bored, even though you might be thinking it's monotonous to eat pasta on a regular basis. Every single dish is cooked in a slightly different way, so it's never like eating the same plate every single day. But I really think you should give yourself some kind of reassurance about the food here, because it is incredible and you can recreate some of the dishes that you think you might miss when you're here as well. So don't let that put you off. Okay, the next concern was about the healthcare system here. And I will say that I've been really fortunate in that I've not had to use the healthcare system very much in the 6 and a bit years that I've lived here. However, I will say that I know that although Italy is supposed to have one of the best healthcare systems in the world, it doesn't mean that it's perfect. In fact, just the other day, I was reading a report about the hospital here in Palermo where patients were left in the corridor without a proper room, even though they required it. So, you know, it can suffer, and it really does depend where you are in Italy. Here in the south, you can find some poorly maintained hospitals for sure. If you live in the north of Italy, comment below and tell me what your experiences have been like with the healthcare, with hospitals, because I can only ever talk from my experiences here in South Italy. So in order to be a bit more transparent, if you live in the central and northern parts of Italy, please comment below and tell me, because I'm really, really curious to know if there is a big difference. But I will say that for the most part, I've only ever had good experiences with the healthcare system here, but you do have to wait a long time if you want to have particular services. The most recent encounter I had with the healthcare system here was back in the summer when I needed to get some veins checked on my leg, and I had to wait 2 months for the appointment at the hospital. Now, of course, it wasn't an emergency, but 2 months is a long time to have to wait for an appointment. And then when I went for that appointment, there was so many people waiting for the same department, and I got very lucky. I was the first person called in, but it was a bit chaotic because I think everybody had been given the same appointment time, which essentially was the time the department opened and not the actual time of our appointment. So it can be a bit chaotic in the hospitals here in South Italy especially. I would say a lot of people tend to go private if they want to have a faster service time. I've gone private before when I've needed to have checkups, and I have found it to be very fast and a better service as well. I will say that especially if you're coming from America, you will notice a huge difference in the cost of private healthcare here in Italy, because it's really inexpensive compared to what you'll be paying in America especially. So don't be afraid of going private if you need to, if you feel that it's going to give you a better service, or even just for a few things you might choose to go private, and then the rest you can use the national healthcare system. It is this. You need to kind of balance the healthcare system with your own personal needs. Some people have had terrible experiences, some people average, some people fantastic. It's a real mixed bag. I think it really does depend where you are in Italy and what you need from the service. But there is the private sector that you can turn to should you want to, if you want to have something that's a bit faster and a bit better. Okay, bureaucracy. Of course, this category had to come up because it's a really notorious issue that Italy is known for. I will say there's no escaping the bureaucracy. You're going to have to complete bureaucracy at some point in your journey here. Your experience, though, will be potluck. It will very much depend on where in Italy you are. I can't even say there is a difference between south, central, north and the islands, because in reality, I've only ever lived in South Italy and I had two wildly different experiences between Salerno and Palermo, and that's within the same region. So literally that is how complicated it can be here sometimes when it comes to the bureaucracy. You really and truly need to brace yourself for what is to come. In fact, this is the video that I think you should watch later, where I really give you some insider tips and advice for how to approach the bureaucracy here, because trust me, it's a problem. But you've just got to make sure that you understand where you have to go and understand how much of your bureaucracy, if any, you can actually do online. And this is where there is a disparity between the north and the south, because I saw the other day a fellow content creator who's based in the north of Italy talking about how you could book appointments online with her local comune. And she was showing all these amazing available appointments. And then it took me back to my experience here in Palermo, trying to book an appointment with the Tari office, who manage the rubbish tax, which is an important tax here to pay in Italy. And the next available appointment was a year later. So it's not easy. It really isn't easy. We can't talk about Italy in one sense in this way, which is why I think it really depends on a city by city basis as to what your experience is going to be like. But just try to understand what you can do in presence, what you can do online. Try to understand as much of what you need to get together ahead of any visits that you have to make. Make sure that you photocopy all of your documents, because the offices will not do this for you. And just try to be as patient as you can. Whenever you have to deal with any form of bureaucracy, things take so much longer than you probably expect them to. So you need to have bucket loads of patience as well. And I promise you, eventually, you'll get there. If I manage to do it here in Palermo, eventually, I can promise you, you can do it. I promise. Okay, visas. This is another topic that came up. So I'm going to point you to the show notes below, where I talk about this website that I found, which really nicely summarizes the different visas and requirements for people coming here from outside of the EU. Now, there is paperwork and bureaucracy and things like this that goes into applying for a visa. But I always say, if you really want something enough, you will put in the work and make it happen. Grit your teeth, because the hard work will be worth it, I promise. And explore the different visa options that there are available for you. Seek advice, look online, ask in expat groups. Just be open to receiving information and go with the sources and the information that you think can benefit you. But don't let the mountain of paperwork that the visa process seems to imply deter you from following your dreams. You can make it happen, but you've just got to start having a lot of patience. And the final comment was about carrying a gun and not feeling like you'll be able to protect yourself because you cannot carry a gun here in Italy. Now, I want to say here that I might have my own personal opinions about whether or not people should be allowed to carry a gun, but then I don't come from America. I come from the UK, where we have different laws and regulations. I think it's very easy for people to have judgments and opinions about other cultures. But what you have to remember is, if you've grown up in a country, I'm presuming that you're from America, if you've grown up in a country where you have the legal right to carry a gun, yeah, of course it's going to feel strange if you're moving to a country where you can't do that anymore. Now, it's not to say that people can't own guns here in Italy, because you can, but it is very strictly regulated and there is a procedure that you have to go through, and not everybody is issued a gun license here in Italy. So it is very different compared to other countries. But I will say that it's a different way of life here. This is not America, this is Italy. And I think you need to open your mind as to what your experience is going to be like here. No part of the world is safe, absolutely. But I think once you really start living here, you will realise that you don't need a gun and that you can enjoy your life and feel a bit more relaxed in that way. Crime does exist here. I'm not sitting here telling you it's a fairy tale, but I'm also telling you that you don't need to liken Italy to any of the experiences you might have already had. And this is saying it with respect for you and your culture, because of course I never grew up in this culture, so I can't really understand what it means to carry a gun. But I do know that it's not something that you will need here in Italy. It's a completely different way of life, and I think you might find it's for the better. So I hope this video has helped you to put to rest any worries or doubts you might have had about moving to Italy. If you still have any more doubts, please comment below and I will do my best to answer them in a future video or short, whatever I end up doing. And if you're really sure that this is still the country for you, but you're curious to know how happy it could make you, this is the video that I suggest you watch next. I'll see you in the next video.